an entire electronic world. And the protagonist of the story in Tron actually becomes computerized himself, enters into the computer, and goes in there and fights the good fight against an evil computer being who dwells inside the computer. Well, J.R., that was a revolutionary idea. It was the first time anyone had ever postulated the idea of a living design electronically created.
But you know, Gary, it wasn't the first time it happened. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us.
Wow.
The Word became flesh. Now, that's some kind of a, forgive me for, I don't mean to be cheapening this concept, but, you know, when Jesus healed blinded eyes and made the deaf to hear and the lame to walk, he could do it in a split second because he's, I don't mean to belittle it by calling him the computer programmer, but in our finite minds, that's about the closest we can get to what really happened.
The grand designer.
Yes.
And you know, J.R., let's suppose someone comes to you who was born blind. That individual has never seen. His eyeballs are atrophied. The neural connections between those atrophied eyeballs and the brain has never carried a single impulse. The brain itself has never learned to interpret neural impulses so as to create a picture inside the mind. And so when you heal that person, not only do you have to give him a set of new eyeballs and a set of new optic nerves, you got to program his brain so that he can process pictures. Only the grand designer could do that.
Yes. Now, on 60 Minutes, there was a segment on reading men's minds. In an MRI machine, they were able to process a photograph, live running effect of the photograph of a brain and the way it functions inside, lights up certain areas of the brain, and they show a picture to this person of a hammer, and it's processed in the brain, and no matter who it was, it's processed to look exactly the same in every person's brain, which means, Gary, that one brain is not different from another brain. It all uses the same program, so to speak. And it's some kind of an electronic program so that they can now tell you what you're looking at or what you're thinking about. If you think of a hammer, they already have a computer program that processes the brain and says, he's thinking of a hammer. It's amazing.
It is, and what it suggests is that design, as conceived by God on this earthly plane, is repetitive. It is fractal in the sense that it's made of infinitely repeating component parts that can be discerned in a particular way. This incredible design is suggestive of a very high mind, not some accidental evolutionary explosion, a big bang, or some little thing growing in the muck and the mire that then becomes more and more complicated and becomes a human being. It's a grand design, and there's no mistaking it.
You know, even in our computers, we don't use alphabets. We create alphabets out of two simple things. We call them zeros and ones, but actually it's light, dark. Light, dark, light, dark. Sure. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
And so when God spoke, let there be light, that was the foundation of what we even call computer designs today.
Indeed. Well, J.R., I am holding the January 2009 issue of Prophecy in the News. On the cover, there is a glorious fractal design here. And we want you to read the whole article because it's very complex, but it does present an idea that has currency, that has presence, namely that there is a creator. This is no accident, this world. It has intelligent design.
Yes. Now, on page 6 and page 7 of the article, we show a picture here of the spiral design of a snail or a sea creature. And then we show the spiral design of a galaxy over here.
Yes.
Gary, it's the same design. We showed the spiral design of the broccoli here on page 3 of the magazine.
Right.
It's can be reproduced in a computer today using a simple algorithm.
Yes.
So when Galileo said that the universe is made up, that in fact he says it's written in a language.
Yes.
And the language is geometry.
Now, Galileo didn't have the word algorithm. He said language. We might just as well say algorithm. In other words, there is a set of instructions. That set of instructions creates what we perceive as life and as the physical world.
Well, atoms are made up of instructions.
Yes.
And DNA is made up of instructions. And so everything has intelligent design, friend. I want you to know that God spoke the worlds into existence, and it wasn't all that complicated. Oh, it's far more complicated than we will ever be able to understand. In fact, Gary, read us the last sentence you have on your article there, just to give us a feel for the grandeur of it, and the fact that in this article we are not trying to cheapen creation, but to show its beauty and grandeur.
I conclude the article, which is a rather long article and complex, but I conclude it in a very simple way by writing this. When the Lord spoke, his utterances were what we now understand to be algorithms. To realize this is not to understand it, but to be awed by it.
Yes. So, what I want you to understand on this program is that when Jesus spoke the worlds into existence, and he did it in some kind of series of algorithms, either spirals or some kind of rectangles, some kind of geometric designs. Now, let me just give you an idea here. This is page 8 of the article. We have a tree here, a trunk and 3 branches off of that tree. But if you'll follow one of the branches out, you'll find another set of branches. It looks like a trunk with 3 branches spiraling off from it. In other words, what you see out here is the miniature of the whole. And so it was not all that complicated for God to make a tree or a bush or a snail or a galaxy. It's just incredible. And Gary, do you remember when John saw the Lord Jesus in Revelation chapter 1? And when Jesus spoke to him, his words took on form and shape. He said it looked like a 2-edged sword proceeding out of his mouth.
Yes.
Now, we can't comprehend something like that, but what he's really saying is this is the process by which he created the universe.
In other words, our speech as human beings cannot create. We're not on that level. He is on such a level that his speech can actually be formed into what we would perceive as a solid object. And John saw a sword coming out of his mouth. That's all that John could say. There was something about his speech that formed a substance or something substantial. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about an algorithm.
Yes. Now, you know, the atom is made up of electrons and protons and neutrons and quarks and no telling what all else. But it is made up of something that doesn't even touch itself. No part touches any other part, but there's some kind of a force field there that makes it into solid objects, so that this tabletop right here appears to be solid, and yet we know that it is not solid because it's made up of atoms. Well, Gary, mankind has been able in a computer using only electrons, and by the way, we didn't create the electrons, we just used them, to make in a computer similar designs to what God has made, and using fractals, these fractal design algorithms, Hollywood has been able to create worlds such as Star Trek to the Wrath of Khan and Jurassic Park and the Star Wars series that was created in a computer, and